Hi, I'm Jonathan Goell. This show is about turning negatives like these into prints like these. Some of these negatives have problems, however, the kind of problems that would make them hard or difficult for a regular commercial printer to print well. Look at this one. This one is overexposed by 3 stops. You can see how dense that it is. The highlights are far too dense. They're far too dense, and the reason is that too much light hit it during the exposure in the camera. The next one, on the other hand, is underexposed by just about 2 stops, and by comparison, it's nearly transparent. It doesn't have enough density. There's too little detail in the shadow areas, and not enough light hit it during the exposure in the camera. Compare both of those with a correctly exposed negative, such as this. This has ample detail in both the highlight areas and in the shadow areas. It's a normal and a good negative. In the next program, I'll show you how to get good prints from even poorly exposed negatives such as these, but in this program I want to demonstrate how to get a print from this well-exposed negative on the end. Last time, I made a contact proof sheet from the same set of negatives, and I selected frame number 6 right here as the negative I wanted to print. Here, by the way, right here and here are the overexposed and the underexposed negatives that you just saw. You can see how different they look from the normal one. Fortunately, the same chemicals and the same trays that I used for making the contact proof sheet can also be used for developing our prints. The first tray holds the print developer. The second tray holds the stop bath. The third tray holds the print fixer. And in the last tray we have a running water wash. The water will be running shortly. I'll tell you all about these as we go along. As the light source for the contact print exposure, I used, of course, my trusty old Enlarger. Let's return to this for a minute and take a more detailed look at it. The top of the Enlarger has a light source, a bulb, in here. I'll turn it on, like that. Just below that light source are a series of glass condenser lenses which help to spread out and make even the light. That light then comes down and hits the negative stage where the negative is put, and the negative is held in place firmly and flatly with something called a negative stage. And so I can see through it. It has a 1 by 1.5 inch cutout, which is exactly the same dimension as a piece of 35mm frame. That goes here, and I'll let the stage down again. Below that is a focusing lens with an f-stop ring, and I'll show you over here in detail what an Enlarger lens really is. It's very little different, in fact, from a regular camera lens. It has an f-stop scale. Here it's on 5.6, here's f11, and it opens and closes from 2.8 to f16, just like most normal camera lenses. In fact, an Enlarger can be likened a little bit to a slide projector in a way because it projects out a small image and makes it into a big image. The whole Enlarger head, the assembly, rides up and down on something called the Enlarger column, and there's a crank on this side of it which allows me to raise or to lower the Enlarger head for different size prints. As you might expect, the higher up the Enlarger head is on the column, the larger the print will be. My old Automega Type B3 I bought very, very second-hand. It must be over 20 years old, and it came without a lens when I found it, so I bought for it a first-rate professional quality lens. That's not a very bad way to go for the start, to buy a cheap but good Enlarger with a very good lens in it. You can also, of course, get something a little bit like the unit which is there, which is a small, inexpensive Enlarger, under $100, including a lens, brand new. The lens in it is a fairly serviceable lens. You could, if you wanted to, at a later time, if you really got into photography, replace the lens in there with a first-rate professional lens. But the one that's there is not bad. But I think that the lens is a heart of any enlarging system, and my rule of thumb is that the lens in your Enlarger should be at least as good as the lens that you have in your camera. To hold the photographic paper flat during the enlargement, you need something called a printing easel. And it's a book-like device which holds the piece of paper. Here, I'll take a piece of typing paper and put it in so you can kind of see. It holds the paper in like this, and you can move these leaves back and forth to adjust for a different size print or to get different kinds of margins around it. This particular unit was under $13. You can buy professional units for $50 or $60, but let me show you how to make one for less than $2. It's not adjustable, but it will hold the paper flat. I bought from an art store something called a pre-cut mat for putting artwork in it. This one is for 5 by 7 inch prints, the kind I'm going to make today. I put a little piece of tape on the end so that it hinged. I made a little tab here I could pull it up by. And on the inside, I put little paper stops made out of tape, which went on in this fashion, so that when I put in a piece of enlarging paper, here we'll pretend this sheet is enlarging paper, it would come up against the stops, and when I closed the top, I would get a perfectly centered, evenly margined print. To make your prints, of course, you need a darkroom. But it doesn't have to be a very elaborate affair. Any place that you can make dark is good, and you can use any kind of surface to put your enlarger and your trays on. You can use tables or bureau tops or shelves. You can even enlarge and work on the floor. I'd recommend that you put some plastic, though, underneath the developer trays to contain any spillage of the chemistry. But you can work anywhere. If you happen to be working in a small closet, I'd recommend that every time you can, between prints, that you open up the door to get some fresh air. Don't open the door when the place is supposed to be dark, though. Lastly, the washing of the prints. You don't have to have running water in the room that you're printing in. You can enlarge in, say, a bedroom, and then you can take the prints into the kitchen where the print washer is hooked up to the faucet and wash there. Just as I did with the contact proof, I must find the proper exposure time in seconds. Now, since, as you saw, some negatives might be a little bit lighter or a little bit darker than others, this would indicate that you would have to use different exposure times in the enlarger for all of the different negatives. So I will again make a test, an exposure test, to find that correct time. First, of course, you must choose your negative. The negative I chose was frame number 6. Both because I liked the picture and also because it seemed to be the most properly exposed negative, and those are the easiest ones to print. It was neither over nor underexposed. We'll take the negative preserver. This is a plastic negative sleeve that you can buy, and I will very carefully remove the negative from it, touching only the edges. Negatives are very, very delicate. They're very easy to scratch, so they're worthy of the greatest care you can give them. Then I'll open up or raise the enlarger head, pull out the negative stage, the negative carrier, and insert the negative emulsion side down into the carrier. I'll do that here. And then close it and make sure that it's well centered, like that. Okay. The emulsion has been put down. The emulsion side of a negative, incidentally, you may remember, is the dull side of it. Next, I want to make sure that the negative is very, very clean so I don't get dust marks on the prints. So there's a very easy way to clean the negative. First, you turn on the enlarger light, make sure the lens is wide open so that you get the greatest amount of light. Then you take a brush that you keep just for this purpose. This is a little darkroom brush, inexpensive, but you can also use a watercolor brush. Hold it under the light, and under the glare of the light, flick off any dust particles that you get. Then take the negative stage with the negative, place it into the negative, take the negative carrier, place it into the negative stage, make sure it's secure, and put the brush away. Now at this point, I'll leave the enlarger light on, but I will now turn off the room lights for the next stage. Now, with the enlarger lens wide open, I must move the enlarger up and down until I get a projected image size which matches the 5 by 7 inch print I will use. Into my holding frame, my easel, I've placed a white piece of regular paper just to make it easier to see. Here you can see an image there which is too large. I'll lower the enlarger head down to it. There we go. And I will make so that the projected image is just slightly larger than the cutout. The cutout, by the way, is actually 4.5 by 6.5 inches. Next, I have to focus. And focusing is a very, very important part. You can't take too many pains to focus carefully. Can you see how the image goes in and out of focus like this? Make sure that you can see all of the details very, very crisp. I want to be able to see the details of this tree and the arm as sharp as possible. And then when it's all set, turn off the light. For the actual exposure test, set the lens to f11. I'll tell you why in a second. I'll tell you why right now. f11 allows you to use 5 to 10 to 15 second exposure times. It's a very convenient aperture. You can use other ones. But f11 also gives you a little bit extra depth of field so that if you happen to have focused incorrectly, you'll still be covered with getting a pretty good sharpness. All right, to close down to f11, I can tell by the click stops that I'm there. Next, the photographic paper. Heart of the darkroom, you might say. I'm using Kodak's Polycontrast Rapid RCF. It sounds like a big name. Kodak is the brand. Polycontrast refers to the fact that this particular paper has a multi-contrast capability. You can produce a high or a low contrast print depending on the filter you use, which I will tell you about in another show. Rapid refers to the fact that it's a quick-acting paper. RC means resin-coated. This is a resin or a plastic-coated paper which makes it waterproof. It will not absorb chemistry. Therefore, you can process and wash and dry these papers in very short times. Non-resin-coated papers take much longer. And lastly, the letter F is simply a code letter which indicates that this is a glossy surface paper, the kind I am recommending that you get at first. Now, I'll bring the paper here. I'm going to make the test. With the house lights off and the safe lights on, I carefully take out a piece of paper. I better tape this down so that it doesn't move. Pull out the white typing sheet, which I don't need, and carefully insert the paper, touching only the edges, like that. Now ready to make a 3-second exposure. Very, very handy to have yourself some sort of a timer or a wristwatch that glows in the dark, or a kitchen clock with a sweep second hand that you can see. I'll just turn this darkroom timer on and click and count off 3 seconds, and manually with the switch do 1, 2, 3 seconds, like that. Now, the next thing is to cover part of the paper and make another 3-second exposure, and I will use the box like this. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. You can also use a piece of cut cardboard. Then move it another inch down and make another exposure. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. Then move it down a little bit more and make one more. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. I have made 4 separate exposures on this. Carefully remove the paper, holding it only by the edges. Don't dislodge the easel or hit the enlarger, and take it over to the developer and plunk it in and immediately start to agitate it. Like that. The development time called for is anywhere from, say, 1 minute to 3 minutes, and I prefer a 2-minute development time. That's my standard time. I always would have a timer on so that I can check that. Keep agitating. Now, as you can see, an image is beginning to come up rather slowly. It usually takes about 20 seconds for the image to come up. Keep the agitation going. By the way, don't poke the surface too much with the tongs. Okay, we can just barely see an image coming up now. To save time, I'm going to toss this one away and move up to the wash tray where I have a test print that I made before and ran through all of the chemistry, and it's completely processed. For this, let me see, the paper's covered. We can now turn on the room lights. Here we have it. You can see 4 different bands of lightness. This is the 3-second exposure. The next one received a total of 6 seconds. The next one received a total of 9 seconds. And the last one received a total of 12 seconds. Which one is the best? Well, the top band, 3 seconds, that's not enough time for a good exposure. The second one doesn't look too bad, but I think the tree is too light. The third one is the best. It has the best middle tones. You should try and gauge your exposure by looking for the best middle and highlight tones of the print. Get those to be as good looking as you can. Skin tones are also very handy and a good reference. It turns out that the best time for this print is 9 seconds. So I'll discard this and dry my hands off because I don't want to touch anything with wet hands, and make another print, this time 9 seconds. We turn off the lights and we make sure that only the safe lights are on, and then we take out another sheet of paper and we put it into the printing easel, right up against the tape stops so that we get even margins. Isn't this a great easel? It's less than $2. Okay. Lens is set to f11, 9 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Open the easel, carefully remove the print. It's very fragile now, these prints. And plunk it into the developer, noting the time because this has to develop now for 2 minutes. That's my standard developing time. And agitate the tray gently, side to side, back and forth, picking up corners. Try and get as varied an agitation as you can, but not too strong an agitation. And again, don't stab the print with the tongs. If you need to submerge it, just press it down very lightly, very slowly. I'm using, once again, Kodak's Dectall print developer. I mixed it from a powder like this, in a beaker like this with plain tap water, and then I put it into a bottle, a chemical bottle like this, and I labeled it Print Developer Stock. I also put the date down that I mixed it. This is called the stock solution, the main solution. For actual use printing, the directions call for a 1 to 2 dilution of developer to water. So I took 10 ounces of the developer, added it to 20 ounces of water, mixed it up carefully and put it in the tray, and here I have developing going on. Remember that you mix from the stock solution with water, and then you get what's called a working solution. Now let me tell you exactly what the developer is doing. Here's a print, by the way, coming up little by little. The developer is changing the exposed but still invisible photosensitive silver salts into visible metallic silver. Those are all the dark parts. The more the light has hit the paper, the more the silver will be affected by the developer, and therefore the darker it will get, the more it will develop. You can flip this over a few times if you like. We're almost ready with the time. Very carefully flip it. I think 2 minutes are just about done. Now, pick the print up in a way so as not to damage it. Let it drain for a few seconds. This includes, by the way, the total time of 2 minutes. When the 2 minutes are up, you then put it into the stop bath. The stop bath stops the development, and you use a different set of tongs for that. The times for the stop bath aren't critical. You can use 5 to 15 seconds or 30 seconds. You can also use other brands of stop bath, Edwall or FR brand. All stop baths are the same, doesn't matter. They all do the same job. I'm using, as it happens, Kodak's indicator stop bath. It turns purple as it begins to go bad. When it's good, it's yellow. Next, pick it up again, drain it for a few seconds. This helps save chemistry, and put it carefully into the fixer tray. The print at this point requires a 2-minute fix. In the fixer, some photographers also call this hypo. Fixer, hypo, the terms are interchangeable. This is what the fixer is doing. The fixer is taking the unexposed and also undeveloped silver salts, which are still light sensitive, and are changing them now into non-light sensitive substances, which will come out later on. This is how, in effect, the word fixing the image gets its name. The fixer really fixes the image so that it is no longer light sensitive. Always follow the recommended times for any fixer and any paper that you're using. This requires 2 minutes with this fixer in this paper. Other papers often require somewhat longer times, 5 to 10 minutes. Don't overfix a print, and also don't underfix it, because either will badly compromise the long life that you can expect from the print. Incidentally, you really don't have to match the chemicals in the paper of a single manufacturer. If you like, for example, you can buy Ilford paper or Unicolor black and white papers, which are very, very good, and they work beautifully in Kodak chemistry. You can also turn it around and use Kodak papers in the other chemistry. But I would recommend that you try and stick with a single combination of paper and chemistry, whichever one it is, until you get used to it so that you understand it and know how that combination works. We're just about ready. Again, we'll drain the print, and that's part of the 2-minute time. And we will finish this print off with a running water wash. A running water wash is needed to get all of the silver substances, no longer a part of the image, washed out of the paper. If they remain in the paper, you can badly compromise the life of the print. Incidentally, the papers are no longer sensitive after about 30 seconds in the fixer, so if you want at that point, making sure the paper box is covered, you could turn on the light. It's very important to keep the prints moving around in the wash tray, otherwise they'll bunch up. Now, RC paper, because it's resin-coated, will wash in as little as 4 minutes, but there are a lot of prints in here, so I have to time that wash from the time the last print went in, not the first print. I'll finish washing this later on, but for the moment, it's permanent enough now to at least take a good look at it. Turn off the water for the moment. Oh, look at that. This print is a normal print. It's neither too light and it's neither too dark. It's not too flat or muddy. It has a nice rich range of tones. It's also not too contrasty or harsh. There seems to be a good contrast quality to the print. Why? Because it was made from a negative that was well exposed and well developed. The easiest kind of negative to make a print from. Now, a word about print quality. For me, a print has the greatest possible brilliance when a full range of tones from, say, pure black to pure white, along with a broad, texture-filled range of middle tones, such as these, are included in the print. You shouldn't have just only middle tones or only all black, all white tones. The technical goal in good printing, at least for most kinds of pictures, is to have detailed, filled shadows, such as in the hair, and yet in that detail of shadows to still have an area which is a pure paper black, just a small part. And also with the highlight areas, such as in the light dress, features in the face, parts of the tree, you should have highlight details, which highlight textures in light gray tones, and yet still against those have an area of pure white. This sunspot on the tree is a good example. I think I can show you what I mean, that I think I can help prove that this is a normal print by showing you by contrast some prints which I deliberately made poor exposures of. Here, for example, is an overexposed print. I made this print for 15 seconds in the enlarger, and here's another one which is far too light, and this is underexposed, and this one was made at 6 seconds in the enlarger. Compare them. The 6-second print, of course, is far too light. Everything is washed out, too white. The hair, which should be dark, now looks as if it were blonde. There are no real shadows in it. At the same time, the dark print has the opposite problem. Everything is deep and obscure and shadow. The hair and the tree and the background all seem to merge into blackness. The face is too dark. Can't see the features. Can't see the features on the face. Excuse me. This is really the best in the normal print. Now, this whole thing about normal prints, there is kind of an exception to it, and that is if you would like to have a dark effect or you would like to have a light effect, maybe not these extreme, you can do it. All you have to do is change the exposure. You can make any sort of a print that you like, because what a good print is to some extent a personal matter. One person's normal print might be another person's print which is too light or too dark. So you can make any print you like, but before you do that, you should learn to make a print that has a normal range to it, called a basic exposure print. Use that as a point of departure before you go off making prints that are lighter or darker. Well, next, we need to squeegee these to clean them off of excess water and then hang them up. And I'm using as a squeegee, sorry I did that too fast, a plain automobile wiper, which very effectively takes the water off. Now I'll take these and I'll hang them up with a clothespin over here. If you want to dry them other ways, you can also lay them out on a beach towel or on a special photographic drying screens, but really this is quite an easy way to do it. Let's take a look at the good print that I just made for one last point about it. When I made it, I enlarged basically the whole negative. I didn't crop this print, but you have the luxury of cropping if you would like to, and I would like to. I want to make an enlarged blow-up of a small part of this negative, the part of the negative that contains just the figure, like that. So I shall turn off the lights, and come on over to my enlarger. Well, I'm already here at my enlarger, and prepare to make an enlarged print. Now, I'll take a piece of white paper, put it in the easel, turn on the enlarger light, open it up to the widest aperture, and raise the enlarger to the top of the column because I want to get the biggest possible image that I can. I also have to move the printing frame, and gee, that's a good size. Lock it in place, focus it. Now, you may have trouble seeing this image, but I can see it, and I have now just the head and the arms down to the elbows. It's carefully focused. Turn off the light. I determined from a test print that the proper exposure for this, now that it's higher, should be f11 at 36 seconds, which is an inconveniently long time. Now, you have to open the aperture to f8 in order to get a shorter exposure time of 18 seconds. That's a little bit shorter, but I would like to go to an even shorter time than that. I prefer 9 seconds, which is 1/2 of 18 seconds. So to do that, I then have to open up the aperture again to f5.6. So my new time is now f5.6 at 9 seconds exposure time. There we go, f5.6. Now, make sure the enlarger is off, room lights are off. Take our piece of paper, carefully put it in. I always have that typing paper focusing sheet to get rid of. Put it in against the stops, close it down, and make a 9-second exposure. That's it. Take it over to the developer, put it in, and agitate it until it starts to come up. Now you can begin to see what's happening to it already. It's beginning to get large. I'm sorry, it's beginning to develop up. It's the same size piece of paper, different kind of print because I just enlarged a section of it. Now in the next show, I'll show you how to make prints that really look great from negatives that really look bad. So keep shooting and I'll see you the next time.